Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Today I Found Out, and in the video today, the revenge of Han van Meegeren, one of the greatest art forgers of all time. And just before we get started, I do want to say that I know this guy is Dutch, and his name, I did look it up, is actually pronounced like Meegeren. I'm probably butchering that, Dutch viewers. You can let me know in the comments below. But just for sake of ease of watching, and so I'm not going to try and do that throughout. I'm just going to go for Meegeren. I apologize to all our Dutch viewers. So let's get started. Han van Meegeren was born in 1889, and he developed an interest in painting at a very young age. But he wasn't supported in his dream to become an artist by his father. His father actually forbade Meegeren's artistic development, trying to steer his son in the direction of architecture instead. Undeterred, though, van Meegeren met Bartus Kortelling, a teacher and a painter, at his school, and Kortelling became van Meegeren's mentor. Kortelling, he loved paintings from the Dutch Golden Age, and likely had a hand in van Meegeren's love of Golden Age paintings as well. A particular fan of Johannes Vermeer, Kortelling showed his protege how Vermeer mixed his colors, a lesson that would have a great impact on the aspiring artist's later life. Still, van Meegeren's father, he was not impressed. Indeed, he sent his son to a school in Delft to become an architect. Indeed, perhaps he wasn't aware, but Delft was the one-time hometown of Vermeer. Van Meegeren, he did prove to be an adept architect, but his heart, it was always set on painting. He continued his painting lessons, and he never took the final exam that would allow him to become an architect. Instead, he moved to art school in The Hague in 1913. Indeed, that same year, he was granted a gold medal from his school in Delft for his painting of the study of the interior of the Church of St. Lawrence. Van Meegeren exhibited his first set of legitimate paintings in 1917, and they proved to be really popular with the critics. However, as time went on, he started to get less and less attention for his work. Critics were more interested in the forward-thinking artists, the cubists, the surrealists. They remarked that van Meegeren had little to offer because he was focused only on the past. He received comments about being an original and simply a copycat, without as much talent as the other great artists who had lived before him. In 1945, van Meegeren, he declared, "Driven into a state of anxiety and depression due to the all too meager appreciation of my work, I decided one fateful day to revenge myself on the art critics and experts by doing something the likes of which the world had never seen before." Well, as you might have guessed from the very title of this video, that something happened to be the perfect forgery. Van Meegeren set out to show the world that he was just as good as those old artists by creating paintings and passing them off as the old artists' originals, and making a lot of money doing it. It was pretty easy for him to settle on Vermeer. He already had a basic knowledge of Vermeer from his mentor, and Vermeer was a good target because it only produced around 35 paintings, just a tenth of his contemporaries' output. This meant art historians were constantly on the lookout for undiscovered Vermeers. The thought that there should be more likely made it easier for them to believe that they saw a new one when they were presented with one, even if it was a forgery. Van Meegeren was a careful forger. Indeed, he did extensive research on Vermeer and his paintings. He bought authentic 17th century canvases and used the original formulas for mixing his own paints. His biggest problem, though, was trying to make the painting look as if it was 300 years old. Oil paint takes decades to dry completely, which meant that a newer painting would be found out the moment that someone touched it. Basically, he was forced to experiment with the original paint formulas as well as baking his paintings in an oven. Most of the paints burned or melted, but he found that using phenol formaldehyde on a finished painting would make the paint harden. When it was finished baking, he would roll a cylinder over it to make more cracks, making the painting look more legitimate. So once the process of creating old-looking paintings was perfected, van Meegeren had another obstacle: the content of the paintings. At first, he painted pictures much like those that Vermeer had painted, but he found that experts looked too closely at them and detected little differences between the real thing and the forgery. He ended up taking a gamble and painting something that was completely different than what Vermeer usually painted, but with hints of Vermeer's style. So now you might be wondering, well, what was the result of that? Well, that was simply millions of dollars straight into van Meegeren's pockets. Indeed, it was his famous Christ at Emmaus painting that allowed van Meegeren to break into the market. The painting was larger than anything Vermeer had done before, war, and it also had a religious subject matter, which was also different for the artist. But art historians speculated that Vermeer had painted something like Christ at Emmaus for some time, and they were eager to believe that the painting really was by Vermeer. He even managed to fool Abraham Bredius, an art historian who had a reputation for authenticating new Vermeers. The historian wrote an article on Christ at Emmaus saying, "It is a wonderful moment in the life of a lover of art when he finds himself suddenly confronted with a hitherto unknown painting by a great master, untouched on the original canvas and without any restoration, just as it left the painter's studio. And what a picture. I'm inclined to say the masterpiece of Johannes Vermeer of Delft." Van Meegeren continued to churn out paintings with religious subject matter, and they continued to be snapped up by art enthusiasts. By the time he was found out, he'd made $30 million from his forgeries, which by the way is about $400 million today. But unfortunately, his incredible success, it ended up being his undoing. During World War II, Hermann Goering, the number 2 man in Nazi Germany, traded 137 paintings for Van Meegeren's forgery Christ with the Woman Taken in Adultery. Now, unfortunately for Van Meegeren, Goering kept meticulous papers regarding his transactions. At the end of World War II, Van Meegeren's name was found next to the trade for the Vermeer, and he was arrested in 1945 for collaborating with the enemy. The allegations, they might have carried a death sentence, and so Van Meegeren was forced to out himself as a forger. He claimed responsibility for the painting of the Vermeer that Goering had bought, along with 5 other Vermeer paintings and 2 Pieter de Hoes, all of which had been discovered after 1937. Fascinatingly, the astonished courtroom actually made him paint another forgery right in front of them in order to prove it, and when he passed that test, the charges were changed to forgery, and he was sentenced to just 1 year in prison, which was the minimum sentence for such a crime. Rather than be angry with Van Meegeren, the Dutch public largely lauded him as a hero. During his trial, he presented himself as a patriot. He had, after all, secured 137 paintings that had been unlawfully seized by Goering by duping the famous Nazi into thinking he'd purchased a real Vermeer. As Van Meegeren said, "How could a person demonstrate his patriotism, his love of Holland, more than I did by conning the great enemy of the Dutch people?" But Van Meegeren, he never did serve his 1 year in prison. He died of a heart attack 2 months after his 2-year trial. Until the end, he believed that when he was gone, his name it would soon be forgotten, and his paintings would eventually be remembered as true Vermeers. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and do not forget to subscribe. We do brand new videos just like this every day of the week, so why not join us as a subscriber? Also, check out some of our videos from the archives over there on the right if you're looking for something else to watch right now. Those are a good place to start. And as always, thanks for watching.